Okay, inshallah. We'll start in a minute or two.
Really, in the recordings, the video doesn't show because when I put the presentation up, it's from here. So then no video shows. Lesson 4 today?
You got the printouts, right?
Yeah, thank you. Please. Play. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله نسأل الله أن يبارك في أعمالنا وأن يوفقنا لما يحب ويرضى وأن يزيدنا علما نافعا وعملا صالحا وأن يهدينا إلى سبيل الرشاد وأن يتقبل منا أعمالنا الصالحات وأن يغفر لنا ذنوبنا وأن يهدينا إلى سبيل الرشاد وإلى سبيل التوفيق نصلي ونسلم على نبينا وحبيبنا محمد عليه الصلاة والسلام أما بعد Inshallah we'll be starting with continuing where we left off on lesson 4. So for lesson 4 we went over some foundations of hadith grading in terms of how a narration actually reaches us. Danielle, were you able to watch the previous recording? Alhamdulillah. So you remember the concept of mutawatir and ahad? You got to that part, mass transmission? Okay. Okay, inshallah. So we started with the preface on epistemology, and I was going over this the other day, just reviewing it and reviewing the class notes on a specific portion. I think one thing I failed to do properly was demonstrate the reason why our epistemology as Muslims is superior to academic epistemology uh, and the world of academia. And I think one of the reasons would be is because my exposure to how the Western academics look at historic narrations is not as expansive as my exposure to our Islamic epistemology as of right now. In terms of our one of the things that we have that they don't have is a reliable chain of narration, is that we know who is telling us these facts, and we know their creed, we know their character, and we know their reliability. And then we know that they actually meant the people that they're relating it to. So we have like what we know is a chain of narration, a Senate, and we know that the people in that chain of narration are reliable people of honorable character. This cannot be said for Western academia. They, generally speaking, don't have this idea of a chain of narration does not exist. It's merely just what we were able to find in piecing things together. So that's one of the reasons why our epistemology is superior to theirs, and why we should not have an inferiority complex when we look at these kinds of things. Let's go through a brief review of what we took last week, inshallah. We took the icebreaker. What do you believe? Sinking Titanic, existence of Rome. One thing I want to clarify about mass transmissions is that one thing about mutawatir, ideas or concepts that mutawatir and mass transmitted, is that it's a general concept. It's not something that's like specific most of the time. So we took the different types of tawatur. Let's see. Uh, we said that it indicates certain knowledge. So can somebody explain to me the difference between the four types of tawatur and how we would know that one is the other? Like how we would know which one is which. Simple. Sorry, you want to try it now?
We could basically just whatever's like being transmitted up to get tell because like these just you can tell it's an action, it's not a text.
Yeah. Do you think it's relevant to what we have right now? Like in terms of like as a genuine question, do you think like this concept of mass transmission is actually relevant to our times?
The Islamic studies are like
In general, as like living as a person living, like getting reports and hearing
Like-
news,
historical like
historical accounts. That's very true. She said the number of people who narrated Sadia. One thing to clarify about the idea of to our current times, nope, it's all distorted. One thing to note about the idea of tawatur is that we actually don't look at the number of people who narrated it. Sorry, we don't look at the chains of narrations like, oh, we have 50, 60. Because if you look in the history of it and the development of the definition of what a tawatur hadith is and what a mass transmitted hadith is, the general concept is just the idea of that it's something that was very broadly and widely agreed upon and known. I honestly would argue that tawatur is very relevant to our current times in general details. Like, for example, the existence of the Holocaust, that there was something that happened there. Is that you can accept through mass transmission that something did happen. The details of it can be argued upon, but the idea that nothing happened, that was all just a stage, the kind of thing, is quite frankly, it's silly and it's not academic. Same thing you can go for the conflict in Israel and Palestine. People are gonna be like, oh, nothing's happening in Palestine. These people are living, proper lives. The Israelis are taking care of them. This we know for a fact is not true because of mass transmission. Even if the details differ, even the Israelis will agree that no, their living conditions are way worse than ours. They know we are bombing them. This is like some things that small things where you can actually apply this knowledge to your actual lives. The difference between the different types is pretty basic and clear. Like tawatur lafzi, ma'nawi. If it's a text, the actual text that was transmitted, we know it's mass transmission of text. If it's just a meaning, a general meaning that was transmitted, we know it's mass transmission of meaning. If it's an action, we know that. A generation, we know that. It's like very clear to be that understand the differences between them. Can someone remind me of the different types of solitary ahad narrations before I even go to the next slide? If you remember, just call it out, inshallah. I can pull up the chat. You remember the different types of ahad, Daniel? Do
not really.
you remember how many were there were? Like, well, okay, before that, what is the concept of like ahad? What is when we say solitary transmission, what are we actually like talking about? Now we can go more specific because Islamic sciences has this, the generic sciences don't.
It's like I'm pretty sure it's like that's just not with the web.
It literally, yes. As a general definition, is that any narration that's not mutawatir is ahad. That's a very good way to put it. What do we look at when we look at ahad? when we're talking about the discussion of, oh, these are hadith ahad, we look at a certain thing to now get into our definitions of, oh, this is this kind of ahad, this is that kind of ahad.
Change of marriage.
Change the narrations. So what specifically about it? Yeah, how many chains and narrations we have. So this idea of like ahad is like we're looking at, oh, how many chains and narrations do we have this person for this specific narration, and then we'll be like, okay, this has three in that chain in that generation, or this has one in that generation. And one point to note, I'll go. This is the next slide. There are three types. Just a reminder. There's gharib, aziz, and mashhur amongst the scholars of hadith. Gharib is in one generation of the chain. There's only one narrator. Aziz is in one generation of the chain. There's only two narrators, and Mashhur is three or more. It's a numbers game to understand this basically, and you'll do like your ruling on a narration of, oh, is it this, this, or this by the lowest amount. So if you have like a hadith that in the time of the Sahaba there's two Sahaba that narrated it, in the time of the Tabi'in there's only one Tabi'i that narrated it, in the time of the Atba' Tabi'in, the followers of the Tabi'in, there's three narrators. You will do a ruling on that and grade that based on the lowest number. So you would say that is a chain which is gharib, because at one point in the generations there was only one person in the chain. So that's just it's a numbers game, and this is to understand the numbers. And then we have the idea of gharib mutlaq, gharib nisbi. And all honesty, in my exposure to hadith, like science so far, this is like pretty delicate information. Meaning you'll find it every now and then, but it's not something that's like people are commonly using this terminology. And it's also just something to understand as a concept itself, is that that one narrator, what generation is he in? Is he in the generation of the companions, meaning only one companion narrated this narration, or is it in the rest of generations? And there's no real like difference between them besides just the numbers. Okay, then we talked about this concept of narrations, ahad narrations supported by action, and that in the early generations of history, they were looking more at the actions of the people around them because they were so close to the time of the Prophet ﷺ. So they would look and they would see that the tabi'een, or the students of the Sahaba, are doing a certain action. And they also have ahad narrations which are in line with those actions. And so they will have their own categorization of this. The Hanafis and the Malikis, seeing as they're the earliest schools of fiqh, they were in the first 100 years. So they have this exclusively. So the Hanafis have this concept and the idea of a hadith which is mashhur, which is different from the scholars of hadith. And the Malikis have this in their concept of the action of the people of Medina. The action of the people of Medina, meaning that the scholars of Medina are doing something. All of them are doing a certain action. That means that this is something they learned from the companions, and the companions learned it from the Prophet ﷺ. So that is a base review. Before we even go into the next section, just open sessions. Any questions about anything we take in this class, or anything moving forward? What do you want to see? I think next week will be our last class for this course so far. But any questions at all, feel free to ask.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
So I have a question about like we understand the categorization, but before the course ends, would you like give examples of how to apply it outside of like in general, how to use this in our thought process?
I can do that right now. So generally speaking, this idea of how narrations reach us is the idea of like news. When any information that reaches you, how is it coming to you? The idea of mass transmission is that everyone is saying like that this event is happening. You find people from all around the world saying that this event is happening. It's very unlikely that the general people, from globally speaking as well as in mass numbers speaking, will agree upon telling a lie. Just like a recent example, honestly, we can give is the example of COVID, the disease of COVID. Was it killing people? What was the reality of it? That's a different story. But the general idea that there was a disease that existed that was affecting people, Whether or not the degree of disease, that's a different story. But the concept that there was something called COVID going around and being passed, and there was causing effects on people. This is something that's mass transmitted. You cannot just come and deny that COVID was not a part of history. It was a made up thing. There was no disease at all that existed. That is a stretch because of the idea of mass transmission. And the idea of ahad, you can use that in the concept of how many people are telling you something. You'll see the benefit of ahad when we get into different degrees of what a narration, like the authenticity of narrations. But ahad is just the idea of like, okay, if one person comes to me and tells me a piece of information, that has a lower weight than if now 3, 4 people are coming to me and telling me the same piece of information. Like if only Daniel comes to me and he says, the class is going to be canceled or ICNA Center is going to be closed next week. Daniel, he's a reliable person. Okay, I can generally believe that, but I'd want to verify it. I want to be like, okay, let me see if I can find someone else that has the same piece of information. And just like if one of your friends comes and tells you a piece of information, you're like, you trust that person, but it's also like it's a very unique piece of information for them to be coming at you with. I'm trying to think of an example. I think one example you could give. It's a relatable example. It's just the example of someone comes to you and tells you that XYZ person has said something about you. They said, "Oh, this person's hair looks weird," and they're saying, "Oh, let's just give names to it, random names." Fatima said that your hair looks weird. Your friend comes to you and says that. Not your friend. Your friend's gonna be Mahmoud. But if that person comes to you and says that to you, first of all, they're doing the mimas and that's besides the point. But that's one piece of information. Now you have a bit of doubt in that because of the character Fatima. Fatima wouldn't say that. But now let's say another friend of yours comes and they also say it. Okay, now this seems a bit more trustable. And then another friend of yours comes and now they say it. Okay, now it seems like okay. Now this piece. But then another point you're gonna have to look at is how reliable these people that are bringing me this information. And this is something we're going to talk about when we talk about hadith acceptance and rejection. And let's actually move into class today because it pertains specifically to that topic. So, ahad narrations alone do not imply certain knowledge, but probable knowledge. The idea of mass transmission, it implies certain knowledge, meaning we know for a fact that this thing exists, that this thing is true. So if there's the general meaning that was mass transmitted in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that he did wipe over leather socks, we affirm that this meaning is for sure true, 100%, without any doubt. Ahad, on the other hand, it's not 100%. It could be 90%, it could be very high level, but it's not at the point where we're like 100% is true. The Quran, we can 100% say 100% without any shadow of a doubt. It's preserved, it's true, everything in it is correct. When it comes to ahad narrations, because of the fact that it doesn't imply certain knowledge, like if 3 people come to you and tell you a fact, it doesn't necessitate that a fact is true. There could be a flaw in it. And what we say that is 90%, we have 90% like of certainty in it, does not mean that it is unreliable. It just means that we have the ability to now look into it. We are not open to questioning it. So we can question this kind of knowledge. Is this actually accurate? And then once it passes the litmus check of, oh, did it qualify under the conditions? Then it's more close to certain knowledge, but it never reached that point of certain knowledge. And you'll find this because of this specific thing in issues of fiqh, specifically, this will have its impact. It's commonly found in the Hanafi method. So do we act? So we just said, okay, it doesn't indicate certain knowledge. So then why are we acting upon it? Because this question can be asked. Why do we, and first of all, do we even act upon it? Ahad narrations do not imply certain knowledge, yaqeen. They imply and implicate dhann, which is probable knowledge. So the question I have is, do we act upon ahad narrations? Just your thoughts. It's not like a you have to be right kind of thing. Yes, we do. Can you back that up? Or how do you know we act upon ahad narrations? What do you think, Daniel? You think so? I don't know enough to answer this question. Yeah, that's fine. What do you think we do? Like, you have any ideas in your head? Like, what leans you towards saying we do? It's fine. I think the idea itself is like, how could we not? But I'll give some examples. First of all, this specific issue is do we act upon ahad narrations is why some of the groups that are misguided, such as the Mu'tazilas, such as the Khawarij, such as the Shia. I don't know who else takes this approach. I think the Jahmiyyah and the Jabariyah might take this approach. But for sure, the Mu'tazilite, the Mu'tazilite are misguided, meaning yani they're Ahl al-Dalal. With nobody has disagreement on that. It's because they don't act upon ahad narrations. They say it's not certain knowledge, so we can't act upon it. But we have proofs from Quran and Sunnah, and then also our daily lives which prove this. So because someone will come to you now, and don't ahad nations have proofs of exactly, they do have proofs of authenticity. But even if they have proofs of authenticity, they will never reach the level of a yaqeen, according to one opinion. And that's the more accepted opinion. They will never reach the level of yaqeen, same way that mutawatir has. But it will always be a step down. So some of the examples we have from the Quran is like, for example, in the story of Moses, in the story of Musa alayhi salam, وجاء رجل من أقصى المدينة يسعى قال يا موسى إن الملأ يأتمرون بك ليقتلوك فاخرج إني لك من الناصحين. One man comes to Moses and he says, "Oh, they're conspiring to kill you." It was just one man, which would, if you look at it in a hadith standpoint, this would be considered ahad. It's not mass transmission, so it's ahad, and Moses is acting upon it. So we see ahad, Moses acting upon it. A singular solitary transmission, but Musa alayhi salam is acting upon it. Another example we have in the verses, yaqeen is the idea of certain knowledge. Yaqeen is like, for example, in the existence of Allah, the Quran, the preservation of the Quran is yaqeenan, that we know that this is the exact same Quran that was transpired from before. Whereas dhann is the idea of probable knowledge. It is most likely correct. We have enough supporting evidence to assume that, but it is not the same as certain knowledge. So another verse in the Quran that indicates that we act upon dhann and probable knowledge is this verse, where basically it's the verses in the second to last page in Surah Al-Baqarah, talking about the rulings on giving debt and taking loans. And so one of the rulings upon it is that you have to call two of your men to witness. If it was just two men, that's classified as a solitary transmission of narration, ahad. And so two people witness a oath in a business transaction. They come to witness. Two people is enough. You don't need the entire society coming. So we act upon that. It's ahad, which are acted upon. And then we also have this hadith when the qibla was changed. Basically, the people were praying towards Masjid al-Aqsa. And then the qibla was changed during like Fajr Salah. A man comes to them and yells at them and tells them that, oh, the qibla has been changed. And he's one man. And they're in the middle of Salah. And yet they rely upon his narration and they change the front. They change front. They change and face towards the Kaaba. These are just some proofs proving that even though ahad narrations imply inferred knowledge, if enough support, this is different. Even though ahad narrations do not provide certain knowledge, they are enough to act upon. It provides enough certainty for us to act upon them. And then we have this concept that Ibn Hajar mentions, and I bring it just for the sake of, because Ibn Hajar mentions it in his book, Nukhbat al-Fikr. Ahad narrations can imply inferred knowledge if enough supporting evidence is provided. This is the idea that, so we have a tawatur, which is certain knowledge at the top ranking. We have normal ahad, which is probable knowledge. And then Ibn Hajar is saying that it can reach the level and enter into the realm of certain knowledge or close to certain knowledge, inferred knowledge, if it has enough supporting evidence. What are some examples of supporting evidence that Ibn Hajar provides? For example, if the hadith is in Sahih al-Bukhari and Muslim, this can reach the idea of ilm, knowledge, certain knowledge. If it has multiple chains which are clear deficiency, like 5, 7, 8, 10 chains of narration, it's still not mutawatir, but they're all clear. It is enough for us to have enough certainty in this. As well, all narrators in the chain are known for their strong and perfect memory. If we have a couple chains and everyone in that chain of narration is a hafiz mutqin, they're someone who's very well known for their memorization and their knowledge. So they would not make a mistake in their narrating of the hadith. Don't worry about this point too much. Even this, he says himself that this is his opinion on the topic. Let's do we're gonna move into the next section of the class. We're gonna now start talking about what is a Saheeh hadith, a Hasan hadith, and a Daeef hadith. So we're gonna start with an activity. You've just received a WhatsApp message that says the Prophet ﷺ said, whoever recites Surah Yasin after Fajr will be given the reward of 100 martyrs. Forward this to 10 people and get the reward. This is a message that was sent to you. What do you do? Or you come across a reel on Instagram that says this thing, whatever is your form of social media. Look, that's like every day. Look it up in the hadith, books of hadith to see it's authentic. Okay, that's true. You would look it up in the books of hadith to see it's authentic. What if it's someone who's reliable? What if I sent this in the group chat? Would you? I mean, I'm not saying that I'm a special person. But let's say like Yasir Qadi, a famous imam known for the science of hadith. He sends this in your group chat. Would you trust it? Would you just post it? Now people can be wrong, of course, but someone who's known would definitely every day, 100%. You'd have to look into it. It's good. Okay, so what if you ask them, what would you do, Daniel, before even going?
Check.
Okay, how would you check it? How would you guys check it? You guys are saying you would check it. How would you check it? And if you don't find it, that means it's not a hadith.
It just diminishes the chances.
Diminishes the chances. That's a good point. For sure. I do the same things oftentimes, but oftentimes I found that either the wording will be slightly different than what they posted, or Sunnah.com doesn't have all the books of hadith. There are many books of hadith they don't have. Sometimes it just won't be there. So that's not a necessity that it doesn't exist. What else would you do?
I wouldn't forward it because that's very specific, 100 martyrs and anything. I would take some time looking into it. And if it's someone very credible that shared it, I would be a little bit more cautious because follow-up questions can trigger people nowadays.
That is
So
true. So let's say you ask them then. You ask them, well, where'd you guys get this? And he says it's in Sunnat al-Darimi, hadith number 346. Ask for them for the evidence. Okay, they told you. It's in Sunnat al-Darimi. That's hadith number 3461. What do you do next? You just post it? You trust them? Go read it yourself. Now you check. You fact check them. You go to Sunnat al-Darimi and you go to hadith number 3461. Sometimes you might not find it, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist because the numbering might be different. Because different book prints, like the publishers of a book, they're the ones who give the hadith its numbers. So a different book print might have a different hadith number, but then you'd have to look and see if it's just a different number. Okay, let's say you found the hadith or something similar to it, but it's not exactly what they said. In fact, uh, then what would you do then? You found now that this hadith does exist, but it's not this hadith. It's something similar to it. What would you tell the person?
Similar how? Like, is it like a different surah that you have to read? Is the reward different?
Different wording, but it also relates to the rewards of reciting Surah Yasin.
I would ask follow-up questions at that point.
At that point, it's questionable. She said, ask scholars to explain the narration. True. So this is a very specific example, and it's specific because I came across when I was doing the research for this lesson. I forgot where I was looking. I found a hadith that someone posted in the comments, and they said, "Oh, whoever recites Surah Yasin after Fajr will get a specific reward." So I'm like, okay, this just doesn't sound like realistic. I went back to Sunnah Darimi because they quoted Sunnah Darimi. I checked the hadith number they gave and it wasn't correct. The hadith number wasn't correct. But then I checked just the wording of the hadith and I found the wording was correct. But they didn't mention the fact that the hadith is actually weak. This specific hadith this specific text that I put on the screen is entirely fabricated. It's a totally mawdu' hadith. And that's good that you guys are questioning. But oftentimes we might get forwarded something, we might not question it. And there's a couple steps we'll do to filter information. And I would recommend this whenever you get sent a piece of information from someone. First thing you want to look at is who sent that piece of information. Are they someone who actually know about the topic? Or are they someone reliable? Like, for example, if my teachers from Kulit Hadith in the College of Hadith in Medina, if they send me a hadith, most likely I'm gonna be honest, I'm a bit lazy, I'm not checking it. I'm gonna trust that he's sending it something that's authentic. This is the reality. He's a reliable person. He's a scholar in hadith. He's reliable. He's known for it. I wouldn't expect him to send something that's false. So I trust him. But let's say, okay, it was someone that wasn't that reliable. It's just someone that's, a friend of mine. He's just a student of knowledge. He's not like a scholar, or he's someone who's aspiring, or I see something on Instagram. Okay, I no longer have reliability in this person and who's narrating this text. Then I'd say, okay, where do they get this hadith from? If they posted where they got it, I can go back. If they haven't, I have to look myself, which is exactly what I did with this specific narration. And so I looked, you would go back and you check. You can go to sunnah.com, post the wording of the hadith or certain parts of the wording, and check. If you find that it's not on sunnah.com, perhaps there still is a source, but now you have to ask the person, okay, what is your source of information? Even after they give you the source of information, you have to say, like, okay, does the source actually say that? Because a lot of people, and I came across this literally this morning, where someone will say someone like Ibn Taymiyyah said XYZ, and then you'll go back to the exact source that they gave, and he said the exact opposite. And they misquoted it, or they took out the context. So you have to say, okay, did the source actually say that? And then the final question is, should you forward it? And if you come to the conclusion that this is not authentic and it was not a sound piece of narration, and it was not a reliable piece of narration, you would not forward it. But if you did come to the conclusion that it's actually reliable, you can forward it. The same idea that we've done right now is similar to what the scholars of hadith would do when they were narrated hadith. They would look at first as who is narrating this hadith to me. And they would look at his character and they look at his memory. These are two main things, and we're going to go into this. And they'd also look at who are his teachers. Where did he get this piece of information? Were they reliable? And then if they couldn't find that, they'd say, okay, is there another piece of information that supports this? or if they are not that reliable, they would look at, okay, are there other supporting pieces of information? So let's start with the concept of Sahih Hadith. So I hope everyone sees the idea that we in our own lives have a certain lens we use, which is similar to the lens that the scholars of Hadith will use when they're looking at Hadith. So let's talk about the idea of Sahih narration. First of all, this ruling of Sahih, Hasan, and Daeef only applies to narrations which are ahad. Mutawatir, we don't have this. Only narrations which are ahad. What does the word Sahih mean linguistically? Sahih, similar to the word sihha, is the idea of something being free from sickness or deficiencies or defects. That is something which is sahih, something which is salim. It's clear from deficiencies. So in the first couple of generations when this terminology is being used, it's a generic terminology. It's just okay, authentic, reliable. How do we know a hadith is sahih? Well, the scholars of hadith will look at 5 different things. First of all, the chain of narration, the people that are narrating this, is it continuous? Are there any breaks in the chain? Second of all, what is the integrity of the narrators? Are these people that lie? Are they truthful people? Someone's coming to you with a piece of information. Is this someone I know like has lied before and he exaggerates? Or is this someone who's always tells the truth? Then you look at, okay, what about his memory, the precision of the narrators? How is his memory? You know, my friend, he's a good guy, honest guy, truthful, but he makes mistakes a lot. You know, he has a bad memory. He'll misquote things. You know, he'll forget where things are. He has a bad memory, so it's not as reliable. Okay, and then if let's say we have a continuous generation, all the narrators are reliable and they have good memory, but now we have 2 narrations which are contradictory. We have 2 narrations which are contradicting each other, apparently speaking. Then we'd have to look at that. Okay, is there a way to fix this idea of contradiction, or is there not? And then, last but not least, is the idea of hidden deficiencies. So this is the science of what is called ilal. We talked Imam al-Tirmidhi, he's a master in the science of ilal, ayn lam lam, ilal hadith, hidden deficiencies within chain. There are different ways you can look in this in terms of ilal. For example, you look at, okay, what is the meaning of the hadith and is it in line with other narrations? Or you can look at, oh, this narrator, is he the strongest student from this narrator? There are different ways to look at ilal. That's a more advanced science. Everyone understands the 5 conditions we look at. It's clear? If it is, inshallah. So let's look at the first idea, and it's the idea of a continuous chain of narration. So one condition that we have, the first thing we will look at is that the chain of narration is continuous. So we have the Prophet ﷺ who will narrate a hadith to his companions, the Sahaba. This Sahaba may narrate to multiple tabi'een. And these tabi'een may narrate to atba' tabi'een. Just to clarify, atba' tabi'een is the generation after the tabi'een, literally meaning the followers of the tabi'een. Okay, so here in this diagram on the board right now, this is a continuous generation. There is no missing link. But let's say, for example, here there is no tabi'i, but the chain goes directly from the atba' tabi'in to the Sahaba. This is what's known as a missing link in the chain. Because we know that it's impossible for this Atba' Tabi'i to meet the Sahaba. It's impossible. They're born, the Atba' Tabi'i was born well after the Sahaba died. So it's impossible they met. So clearly, there is a missing narrator in this chain. So this is the first thing that we look at. Is the chain continuous or is there a missing narrator? Okay. The next thing we'll look at is, are these people reliable? The Sahaba, so when we come to the Sahaba, what do we do? Do we look at the reliability of the companions of the Prophet? Feel free to shout out the answer, inshallah. What do you think of the no? Do you have to actually question, like, was the Sahaba reliable?
I don't think that's a question,
Why so?
because they all are reliable. I'm pretty sure all Sahaba are reliable.
Exactly. We have this principle that we mentioned in one of our previous lessons, is that as the Sahaba, all of them are reliable. All of the Sahaba are reliable. And what do we mean when we say that they are just and reliable? Is that it is impossible for them to have lied upon the Prophet ﷺ. And their memories were acute. And so this is important to understand, because if there is difference on who is the Sahaba, if we don't know who the Sahaba is, it's not a problem. It's because the Sahaba, all of them are reliable. And this is from the testimonies of the Quran and the Prophet ﷺ himself. So now let's say in the chain of narration, this tabi'i, let's give him a name. Let's say Nafi'. Nafi' is a well-known tabi'i, Mawla ibn Umar. He is the freed slave of Ibn Umar, the servant of Ibn Umar. So let's say he has strong memory. When we look at the integrity, we're not looking at memory yet. We're looking at this man named Nafi'. Did he used to lie? In the hadith of the Prophet or outside? Okay, he didn't used to lie in his life at all. Okay, good. He has integrity. Did he commit sins? Was he openly committing sins? He didn't. Okay, was he a rational person? Meaning, was he someone who was not majnoon, crazy? Was he a person who, when he narrated the hadith, he was of puberty? And was he a Muslim? And these are 5 things which are known as adalat ruwat. There are 5 things we look at when we look at were our narrators adl. The term used is adl, meaning just and a person of integrity. Let's look at this. So we see there's 5 things we'll look at. The first thing we'll look at is, were they Muslim? This does not mean that a non-Muslim cannot be a person of integrity. But the reason why the scholars of hadith will not accept, well, first of all, actually, why do you guys think we will not accept the narration of non-Muslim? Even if they're a person of integrity, they don't lie. What do you think, Daniel? The question is, why would scholars of hadith not accept a hadith from a non-Muslim?
Did they feel like they might have integrity like as a personal value, but not religious integrity?
They're not allowed. It's similar to that concept. It's similar to that concept. Is that they could be like an upright person, but this is our deen we're talking about. And this person, to begin with, he doesn't believe in the Prophet. So the possibility, even the remote possibility that he could say something to harm our deen disqualifies him from being accepted, like narrations, from us accepting narrations from him. We also have the idea that are they a rational person? What we mean when we say rational here is not like what we talk about, like, oh, someone who's capable of critical thinking. We mean the concept of are they crazy, meaning have they lost their mind, or are they a rational person? They're capable of reasoning and understanding, the capability, not the level of it. Someone who's like in a mental house, a mental institute, they would not be considered someone who we can take hadith from. Next thing we look at is, are they pubescent? Have they reached the age of puberty? We will not take the narrations of a person who is narrating hadith before the age of puberty, because they're still a child, they haven't mentally matured enough. It's like taking something so valuable from a kid, someone who's not mature enough. When they reach the age of puberty is a different story. Like Imam Bukhari, by the age of 10, he had reached puberty. He was able to narrate hadith. But we have to see if they actually have reached the age of puberty. Fourth is obviously the most clear one, is were they an honest person, or were they someone who lied in their daily life or in the science of hadith. If they're an honest person, then we would trust them if they're known for their honesty. Then we also look at, were they free from sins? What does this mean? It means that they did not openly undertake major sins, and they were not openly obstinate upon minor sins. Obviously, the sins which are committed in private is not something anyone can judge upon, meaning in terms of hadith, because that is knowledge of the unseen. But something that is done openly. If we see you're a person that's drinking alcohol in the streets, you're an open sinner. If we see you're a person who constantly doesn't lower their gaze, and it's clear, and this is something that would negate and take away from your reliability as a narrator of hadith. And then we'd also look at, are they free from things which breach upright character? This is a general concept, is the concept of khawarimun muru'ah. It's the violations of social or religious decorum or respectable conduct. Meaning, we have a certain, in our culture, in our status, in our society, scholars don't do XYZ. Like, a scholar of hadith is not gonna go to a gathering where there is music and he's partying and there's alcohol. This, even if he's not partaking in it, meaning he's not drinking alcohol, he's not dancing to the music, him being in that scenario is something which is deducted from his character and is something that's made him less reliable. This is one of the more general and things which are more lenient when we're analyzing a narrator of hadith. The first five are more important. Were they Muslim? Were they a person of aql? Did they have rationale? Were they of puberty? And then the most important two, were they honest people and are they free from sins? The first three is like check or X. But the fourth and fifth is we have to look in it more deeply. So these are the six things we'll look at in the integrity of the narrators of hadith. Another thing we'll look at when we're looking at just trying to verify the reliability of a hadith is what's known as dabt al-ruwat, the precision of narrators. There's two types of dabt, precision of memory and precision of the preservation of writing. So think about it, you're in 100, 200 Hijri. There's only two ways you're narrating hadith. You either have it written down and you're reading from your writing, or you have it memorized and you have a great memory. So we look at, okay, this person, does he have a good memory? Can he retain the hadith exactly as he heard it, even after a long time has passed? Or retain the meaning of the hadith? If he can do that, he has a strong memory. We can rely on that. Or we look at, have they preserved their writing? Meaning, when they wrote down the hadith that they got from their teacher, did they actually take care of the papers that they wrote on? Or did they just give it to anyone? Let's see a story of a narrator who one day he has his hadith book and a random student comes and he asks to borrow his book from him. And this scholar, without even thinking, he just gives him the book and he says, okay, borrow it and give it back to me when you're done copying. This person who took the book, he was a malicious person, let's just say that. And so he actually changes some of the wordings and the works in the book of his hadith book. And so the scholar, when he gets his book back, he's narrating, and the people in his gathering, they realize that some of the hadith have been changed. He doesn't realize because he's just reading off the book he has. And so they approach him on this. And they say, well, why are these hadith changed? The narration is different, the text is different. And he begins to look at it and he's like, you're right, these have changed. And he realizes that it was because he gave the book leniently to someone else. And so, because of this instance, this narrator, he is now deemed, this person who just gave his book away, as a weak narrator. We cannot rely upon him because he's so lenient with with his preservation of his hadith. He doesn't really take care of it. So that's the two types of preservation. It's their precision of the memory and their precision of the writing that we will look at. Next thing we'll look at is Adam al-Shudud, is the concept that this narration that they have is not contradictory to more authentic narrations. Meaning, what do we mean when we say that? The people in chain one, let's just make a diagram to make this a bit more clear. Let's say it's an acceptable hadith. When we looked at the narrators, we looked at all of the chain of narration. We looked at the people who narrated that hadith, the different chains of narrations. We found that this is an acceptable hadith. It's okay. It's not amazing. It's not perfect, but it's good. And then we have a different chain or a different hadith, which has amazing narrators. The people in that narration, their memories are sharp, very well acute. They're very well known for their knowledge. They're known for the preservation of their hadith, way better than chain one. And this scenario, if chain one and chain two contradict each other, we're going to take preference to chain two. Why? Because the chain of narrators and the people in the text itself is more reliable than chain one. So this would make chain one a weak hadith because it is contradictory to something that is more reliable, or it would make a part of the hadith weak. Another concept we have is that it cannot have any hidden defects. So this is the idea of like subtle flaws which can be found in the hadith. And we'll get into what are the examples of subtle flaws, but just know that it can have any hidden defects. These are the 5 things we look at when we're grading a hadith and when we're looking at specifically a hadith which is Saheeh. So let's take an example. There's a hadith in Sahih Bukhari. The Prophet ﷺ lagged behind us during a journey that we undertook. He caught up with us while the time for prayer was pressing us, and we were making wudu. We were wiping over our feet instead of washing over them. And so he called out at the top of his voice, "Woe to the heels from the fire." He said this 2 or 3 times. The general idea of this hadith is that when you're washing your feet in wudu, you have to make sure to catch all of your feet, including the heels. Let's look at the chain of narration for this hadith. Imam al-Bukhari narrates the hadith from Abu al-Nu'man Arim ibn al-Fadl, who narrates the hadith from Abu Awana, who narrates the hadith from Abu Bishr Ja'far ibn Iyas, who narrates the hadith from Yusuf ibn Mahak, who narrates the hadith from the Sahaba Abdullah ibn Amr, who narrates the hadith from the Prophet ﷺ. So the first step we do to see, first of all, is this hadith reliable or not? First step, is there a continuous chain of narration? Okay, Imam al-Bukhari would look at when was he born, when did he die? And then we look at each narrator. All of these narrators, they were alive in similar time spans. So we now know that the possibility of them meeting is there. There is a continuous chain of narration. And then, if you're Imam al-Bukhari, you're going to look for proof. Is there proof we have that they met? Imam al-Bukhari, with his conditions, he'll say, I found proof that Abu Awana met Abu Nu'man. I found proof that Abu Bishr met Abu Awana. I found proof that Yusuf met Abu Bishr. And I found proof that Abdullah met Yusuf. I have proof of it all. You want the proof? I can show it to you. And so he found proof of all this. So that's the first thing. We'll look, is there a continuous chain of narration? Then what we look at next? What we look at next, Daniel? Continuous chain of narration, then the character and of the narrators. Okay, are these people liars or are they truthful people? We looked at 5 things. Are they Muslims? All these people are Muslims. Okay, we have proof of that. Were they all people who are baligh? Yes, they're all baligh. They all had aql, they're rational. Okay, they all had aql. What do we look at after those 3? Their honesty. Were these honest people? Were they truthful, reliable people? And now this is where the science, which is known as ilm al-rijal, comes into place. The science and the knowledge of narrators. So because we have to know the reliability of narrators and their character, the scholars of Hadith compiled books, which are very, very long books, in which they took all of the narrators and they would mention, okay, XYZ, he's a reliable, he's truthful, his memory is the XYZ. And these are people at his time who are telling him or saying this about him. And so we know, if you want to find a narrator and find his character, you can find it in these books. So then us in the 21st century would go back to these books. We'd look, Abu Nu'man, is he trustworthy? Is he truthful? Okay, he is. Okay, how is his memory? Okay, he's firmly reliable. This is thiqa. I forgot what the Arabic wording of this is. Abu Awana, he's truthful and he's firmly reliable. Abu Bishr, truthful and firmly reliable. Yusuf, truthful, trustworthy, and firmly reliable. And so, after looking at all of the narrators in the chain, looking at their lives, looking at their character, and saying, okay, they're all reliable, and then also knowing that they all met for certain, we have proof that they all met each other. And then, okay. The chain is continuous. We know that this chain goes back to the Prophet ﷺ. We know that they all met each other. Okay. But now they're narrating from each other. They're saying, I heard this from this person. Okay, you who are saying you heard this, are you reliable? Do you have good memory? Are you misremembering it? Or did you actually get it? He said, you look into his life. You find the note, he's a truthful person and he had a great memory. Okay, so now he's an honest person, he has good memory. He's not going to make a mistake in his memory. The chances of that are unlikely. Okay, what else will we look at? So we looked at the chain of narration. We looked at the honesty of the narrators. We looked at the precision of the narrators. Now we'll look at the hadith itself, and also the chain. Is it contradictory to any other hadith? No, this is not contradictory, and there are no hidden defects. These 5 conditions have been met. Now we will say, okay, this hadith is a Saheeh hadith. Is that process clear to everyone? It's clear, Daniel? So that is the process which is known as hadith grading. We look at these 5 things, and then we look at the people in the narration, and we look at the chain of narration itself. Stefan, Sadia, it's clear?
Alhamdulillah. Yes, clear.
Okay. That is the idea of Sahih Hadith. Not all Sahih Hadith are at the same level. Some are better than others. Some are more reliable than others. Ibn Hajar, who is the author of the work we're studying, or we're going through his content, he says there's 6 rankings. If a hadith is in Bukhari and Muslim, that is the highest ranking. If a hadith is only in Bukhari, that is the second highest ranking. If a hadith is only in Muslim, third. If it's according to the conditions of Bukhari and Muslim, but it's not in their books, meaning it fulfills the conditions, but Bukhari and Muslim just didn't narrate it. Okay, that's the fourth. If it's according to one of their conditions, not the other, and they just didn't narrate it, okay, that's the next one. And then if it's according to conditions of other scholars of hadith for Sahih, that's the least and lowest ranking of a Sahih narration. So these are the different rankings of Sahih and what a Sahih hadith is. Before we go into Hasan, we'll take a 5-minute break. We'll continue at 12:20, and we'll go into a Hasan hadith and a Daeef hadith. Hopefully, the idea of what is Sahih, when we say a hadith is Sahih, now you understand what that means and the level of reliability that is. We'll take a break, inshallah, and we'll continue at 12:20. Is there a comprehensive list of Sahabas? There are books that are written on this topic. Ibn Hajar has a book called Al-Isaba fi Tamyiz al-Sahaba. Most of these works are in Arabic. I never seen any English translations. There's another work called Al-Isti'ab fi Ma'rifat al-Ashab li Ibn Abd al-Barr. Ibn Abd al-Barr, he is an Andalusi scholar. He writes this work. These are works you can find to find out the list of narrators of Sahaba, as well as a description of their lives. I would recommend, if you're looking for something that's like a nicer read, go back to Ibn Abdul Barr's book. He includes like more like stories, whereas Ibn Hajar's work is very academic. It's like, okay, this Sahaba, he narrated this hadith, this person heard from him, this person heard from this person heard from him. And these were his students. Yeah, so that would be my advice for that. Break. Bye. or like that. This one? Pretty familiar. So here with this, and then some of the body, which is the chaperone. Their government groups in the boat. You want young missiles? That's the perfect place to start. Most other nations have needs. We can't celebrate them. طيب بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. So let's look at a Hasan hadith. So if you understand in the early generations of hadith scholars, there was no such thing as a Hasan hadith. Like for example, Ibn Khuzaymah, Ibn Hibban, and Al-Hakim, Abu Abdullah Al-Hakim, they do not differentiate between Sahih and Hasan. And many early scholars did this. They would not differentiate between Sahih and Hasan. As the science becomes more developed, the distinguishment is made, but in the initial stages of hadith grading, the idea of Hasan was not there. But the reason being is because of the difference between a Sahih and Hasan hadith is very close. So we'll look at it. The only difference in reality when we're looking at a Hasan hadith is in the precision of the narrators. So a Sahih hadith, the narrator's memory is on point. He's amazing. Doesn't mess up, ever. A Hasan hadith is like, okay, the narrator's memory is good, but it's not amazing. He has made mistakes. So now that is the distinguishment between Sahih and Hasan, is the precision and the memory of the narrator. Are they as good? Are they at that high level to be considered a hadith which we're gonna grade as sahih, or are they just acceptable? And this is the difference between something which is like authentic, for certain, versus something which is just acceptable, a Hasan hadith. So the difference between a Hasan and Sahih hadith is a scholar's judgment of the precision of a narrator. And this is also why you'll find that certain times scholars will differ. Is the hadith sahih or is it Hasan? It's because they come to different conclusions after analyzing the different statements about a narrator. Was that narrator at a level of memory which is up here, or was he just up here? It wasn't as amazing as top tier. You can think of it like a tier list. Like narrators of Sahih Hadith, they're S tier. Whereas narrators of Hasan Hadith, they're only A tier. Or a narrator in a Hasan Hadith is only A tier. Imam al-Tirmidhi, he plays a role in the usage of the term Hasan. He is not the first one to use it. Imam al-Shafi'i is quoted to have used it before him. but he is one of the people to make the term Hasan famous. When he kept using it. And also, when Imam at-Tirmidhi says the term Hasan, he does not mean what we just described. That it's just someone whose memory is a bit weaker. He means something else, and we're gonna get to it tomorrow. The idea of Hasan li ghayrihi. But this is just Hasan. So that is the idea of Hasan. Everyone clear on Hasan? Is there any let's maybe let me show you an example. Let's go back to the example with Imam al-Bukhari's hadith. I want you to look at this chain narration. Yeah? Oh. So the shots are just drowned. Let's say Abu Bishr, Ja'far ibn Iyas. I don't want to do that because let's say this was not the narrative. Thank you, Jazakallah. Let's say it was Abu Ja'far, a narrator by the name of Abu Ja'far. I'm just making this name up right now. And he was trustworthy because the character, he has to be honest still. He cannot be a liar. And generally reliable. All of a sudden, even though everyone else in the chain is firmly reliable, they're at a very high level of memory, and their memory is very sharp. Because of the presence of Abu Ja'far in the chain of narration, this will turn from a Saheeh hadith to a Hasan hadith. Why? Because his memory is weaker. And because he's part of the chain, it's as if he makes a mistake, it's just that everyone else made a mistake. Meaning the rest of the chain is going to be mistaken. So he is less reliable than a Sahih hadith. Hopefully that's clear on the difference between Sahih and Hasan. Just so you guys understand what we mean when we're saying, oh, this hadith is Hasan. Still reliable, it's still acceptable. And we use it, we act upon it. But it's just not the same degree and level of a Sahih hadith. So let's go now into what is a Daeef hadith? What is a weak hadith? There are two central reasons for a hadith being weak. It's either a problem in the chain of narration, or it's a problem in the narrators that are part of the chain. So a problem in the chain of narration, let's say, like we described previously, let's say we have the Prophet, then you have a companion, Sahaba, and then all of a sudden we have a atba' tabi'i. Atba' tabi'i, let's say he was born 70 Hijri and he dies 150 Hijri. And the Sahaba, he was born maybe 5 Hijri. Let's making this up right now. And he dies 50 Hijri. Sorry, I know it's on top of the text. Please feel. These two people could have never met. It's impossible. If the Sahaba dies in 50 Hijri and this person is born in 70 Hijri, it's impossible they met. And so, if we don't find any other narrations, so now we know for certain there's a missing person in this narration. Who is the person that is between these two? That's the question. We try to find something, and if we find something, we work with it. But let's say we never find anything. There's nothing to fill in the missing gap. Then we'll say this hadith is weak. It's daif. It is a daif hadith. Why? Because there's a missing chain of narration. We can't rely on this information. There's an entire person missing from the chain. That is reason number one why we will reject and grade a hadith to be weak. Reason number two is a problem in the narrator. So we said there's two core reasons, either a problem in the chain of narration and its continuation, or a problem in the narrators themselves. When we're talking about the narrators themselves, we look at two things, their integrity and their precision. So we look at the same five things to understand what a weak hadith is now, and in terms of integrity. If the narrator of the hadith, and there's any narrator which is a non-Muslim, it's a weak hadith. If any narrator of the hadith is majnoon, he's not mentally sane, it's a weak hadith. If the narrator hadith is prepubescent, it's a weak hadith. If the narrator of hadith is a liar, whether inside or outside the science of hadith, meaning in his regular life, does he lie? And when he's doing business, is he lying? Okay, that automatically disintegrates his honesty, takes away from his honesty. And another even worse point is now when he's narrating hadith, we have proof that he's just made up hadith. He's lying. This is a weak hadith. Sorry. Does he commit major sins in public, or is he obstinate upon minor sins? Okay, that's also another reason for hadith being a weak hadith. Or is he breaching upright character, meaning he's not holding up to the standard that scholars of hadith should be holding themselves up to? Then as well, we would say this hadith is a weak hadith. If you can already see, not all of these are on the same level. Someone who just has a bit of their character is not as amazing as it should be, is not the same as someone who's a liar. So this is where the idea of different levels of weak hadith come into play. And then, so the first thing you look at is the integrity of the narrators. The next thing you will look at is the precision of the narrators. Meaning, how is the memory of the narrator? This narrator of hadith. Does he have good memory, weak memory? He has a weak memory. He's known to be making mistakes. That hadith is a weak hadith. So if there are people in the chain, we know they have a weak memory, they make mistakes a lot, we'll dictate that hadith is weak. So we know that and other reasons for a hadith being weak, as like we mentioned, it's either contradictory to a text which is more reliable, or there are hidden deficiencies within the chain or the text. So we look at these aspects, these different aspects to understand the reliability of a hadith. We will look at if there's a problem in the chain narration, it will be a weak hadith. If there's a problem in the integrity of the narrator, meaning he's not Muslim, or he's insane, or he's prepubescent, or he's a sinner, or he's a liar, or he does things which breach his upright a status of character, or there's a problem in his precision, he has a weak memory, or there's contradiction to a hadith, a text which is more reliable, or there's hidden deficiencies within the chain or text. All of these are reasons for a hadith being weak. So now we have taken what a Saheeh hadith is, what a Hasan hadith is, and what a Daeef, weak hadith is. Does anyone have any questions on any of those concepts? Saheeh, Hasan, Daeef. There are two other categories we're going to get to, but just these three categories. Anyone has any questions, feel free to ask.
Um, in the first lesson you mentioned mutton, right? Like the Hadith text itself. In these categorization, we're not looking at the text itself?
So, when we're talking about Sahih, Hasan, and Daeef, the first thing you will look at is the chain of narration. And that is where it comes into we're looking at the sanad. We're looking at the narrators and the continuous chain of narration.
Okay.
Then, when we're looking at the metin, this is where these two things come into play, which are on the screen. Is it contradictory to a text which is more reliable?
Okay.
Or are there hidden deficiencies? This is where we'll look into the metin.
Okay. Jazakallah khairan.
Yeah. Does anyone have any more questions on the idea of Sahih, Hasan, and Daif? One sec. I'm pulling up the next lesson. Just having some technical difficulties. Okay. So has anyone heard of the concept called Sahih li ghayrihi and Hasan li ghayrihi? Something which is Sahih through corroborating evidence and something which is Hasan through corroborating evidence. Have you guys ever heard of that concept? Why not? No? Okay, interesting. That's very interesting. So this is a concept we're going to take when we talk about like a hadith being Sahih, Hasan, or Gharib, or Daif. We're looking at one chain of narration. Like exclusively would be looking at one. This is a general term for an individual chain of narration. Now, when we're looking at multiple chain of narrations and now coming to a grading on a hadith, there's a bit of a more academic approach we will take. It's like the idea of having primary evidence and then supporting evidence. Like your primary evidence is your main point, but the supporting evidence will either strengthen or weaken the argument. Okay, let's see how I can copy on this device. Done. Okay. Document. Lesson 5 presentation. Bismillah. Okay, now we're going to look into the utilization of multiple chains in hadith grading. So we're going to talk about the utilization of multiple chains in hadith grading, a hadith which is authentic through supporting narrations, a hadith which is acceptable, basically Hasan Sahih li ghayrihi, Hasan li ghayrihi, and Hasan Sahih is 3 other terminologies you'll hear. So we took Mutawatir, Ahad, Sahih, Hasan, Daif. And now we're going to take Sahih li ghayrihi and Hasan li ghayrihi. Let's do an icebreaker, an activity to start off this class. We're going to have some riddles. Oh, this is the wrong class. There's some riddles I've asked ChatGPT to help me with. We're going to go through these. So basically the riddle is of an object or something, and you have to guess what that object is. First clue, I'm alive, but my feet never leave the same place. Any ideas of what this might be?
A tree?
Yeah, it was a tree. I didn't expect you guys to get
Wait, no way. It was a tree?
I didn't expect you guys to get it from the first clue. The whole idea was the first clue is supposed to be generic, and then you're supposed to build up to it. Okay, so that was the answer. You got it. Look at the first clue. I'm alive, but my feet never leave the same place. And then you have the next clue. I hold my arms high but never hug. And you have the next clue. Many living things depend on me, but I ask nothing in return. And then the final clue, which is the most obvious. My shade cools the ground and my leaves dance in the wind. The idea behind this is that you had a generic idea, and then as you got more clues, the idea became more clear and it became more founded. Your answer became more grounded. Okay, let's do set number 2. I can be carried, but I carry worlds within me.
Whoa.
A globe. Okay, that's clue number 1. What do you think, Daniel? No idea. That's how it should be. Say, I can be carried. This is this next example. I can be carried, but I carry worlds within me.
Book.
A book. Okay. Let's try the next clue. A map, an atlas. I speak without a tongue, but only to those who open me. Also started saying a book,
Phone.
a phone. Okay. Let's take the next clue. I hide secrets in lines, waiting to be discovered. Also, a book. Society is more confident in her answer in the book. Danielle, what are you thinking? You think it's a book as well? Safar, Sazia, you think it's a book as well? What is Sister Shazi and Sister Farah thinking? Clues are getting confusing. Encyclopedia well. Last but not least, my pages teach those who turn them. Yeah, it's a book. From the first answer and the second answer, you probably were guessing now. The first guessed in the second answer, the book. But as the clues became more clear, and we got more evidence to support the original concept, it became very clear that the answer is a book. And the same thing with Hadith. As more chains of narration come to prove a concept, it becomes very clear that the meaning is reliable. And last but not least, hopefully this one is not as easy. ChatGPT. What?
Shadow.
I am a follower.
Oh,
I am a follower who never speaks, yet I travel every night. ChatGPT failed me with these riddles. What did she say? I'm listening but very busy. Okay, no problem. A shadow. Okay. What are you thinking, Daniel? Any ideas?
probably shadow.
Okay. Sometimes I am invisible, but I am always present. This riddle is better. Shadow travels at night. Sometimes I am invisible, but I am always present. Deer. Okay. Next clue. I borrow light, but give none of my own. This riddle was good. So we have 3 clues right now. I am a follower who never speaks, yet I travel every night. Sometimes I am invisible, but I am always present. I borrow light, but give none of my own. Started seeing the moon. Okay. Then what are you thinking? No, I take that back. It's got to be shadow. A shadow borrows light and gives not its own. Shadow is not some like always present though. How does a shadow borrow light? Okay, the last clue will give it away. When I appear fully, Ramadan and Eid are near. It's the moon. The moon. Yeah, you actually got it in the third one. This riddle is better than the other shit. So the point that I'm trying to get across is that sometimes you can have a piece of information that's a bit generic, and that it's like, okay, do we really know the answer? And then you get more evidence and more clues. Okay, this must be the answer. And then the clues just keep building up and up to the point where like, oh, this is the answer. Similar things happen with hadith grading. Sometimes you might have a hadith and you're not certain, okay, is it Saheeh or is it Hasan? Because in that one chain of narration you're looking at, there was a person whose memory was iffy. It wasn't that good at his memory. His memory was not as strong. But then, as that builds up, we have multiple people that have the same narration. They're all Hasan hadith. But multiple Hasan hadith adding up will make us give that the ranking of Sahih. But not just Sahih, something which is known as Sahih لغيره. So this process is known as i'tibar. The process of using multiple chains in a narration is known as the process of doing i'tibar.
Yeah.
So it's literally meaning contemplation. So this is a comparative analysis of chains of narration. Al-i'tibar. There are two different types of supporting narrations. The one, simply put, is where in the chain is the supporting narration. If it's in the companion, that's known as al-mutabi'. And if it's in other than the companion, or sorry, if it's in the meaning, it will be known as a shahid. So the idea of a mutabi' or mutaba' is that we have companion 1 and companion 2. And they're both narrating the same hadith or a hadith with a similar meaning. These will come together and this is what's known, this companion 2, after we've done i'tibar, this is what's known as mutabi'. His hadith is going to be known as mutabi'. We also have the idea of a shahid, a hadith from a different companion, but it supports the hadith and its meaning of wording, even if the chains are completely different. So basically, it is different hadith from different companions which share similar meanings. So this is the idea of i'tibar, mutaba'ah, and a shahid. Then we have, so now let's go back to hadith, idea of sahih li ghayrihi, the idea of something which is authentic through supporting narration. Give it a minute. Just give it one, we'll let them get the chairs. طيب, inshallah. So when we're going to look at a hadith which is called Sahih li ghayrihi, a hadith which is authentic through supporting narrations. Let's take the idea of a job resume. Imagine someone is applying for a job and their resume on its own already meets the requirements. They went to Yale, they have all the requirements you need, they have all the job credentials you're looking for. It in itself is good enough to be hired. It's good, but it's not perfect. Oh, sorry, it's good. This is an example. He is amazing in himself. On top of that, they also bring strong recommendations, letters of recommendations. And so these recommendations, they don't make an unqualified person qualified, but they make someone who's already a good candidate, someone who is more reliable for the job, and you have more trust in his reliability. A Hasan hadith, a hadith which is Hasan on its own, is like a resume that already qualifies your job positions. It has everything you're looking for. And now when you're getting those those letters of recommendation, it's further qualifying the job resume. And it's raising that hadith to a higher level. And that is the idea of a hadith which is Saheeh li ghayrihi. It is authentic through corroborating evidence. So why is a hadith Hasan? It's because this is a question actually. I asked, why is a hadith Hasan and not Sahih? Precision of the memory of the narrator. So if we have multiple people that are indicating and saying a certain statement, and all of their memories are fairly reliable, what do you think that would indicate for us, Danielle? Like if we have multiple people that have like acceptable memories, it's not horrible. Their memory is pretty good, and they're all saying the same thing. What would that indicate to you? Yeah, they're all Hasan already, but now there's like 5, 6, 7 Hasan hadith all saying the same thing.
Oh, is there a kind of hadith called Hasan Sahih or something?
So no, this the one we're taking right now.
Oh.
It's a hadith which is Saheeh li ghayrihi. Yeah, it's close to Sahih. It's in between a hadith which is Sahih and a hadith which is Hasan. It's like, this is exactly what you're thinking about. It's the idea of there's multiple Hasan hadith and they're all saying the same thing. So that now is no longer just Hasan. It's Sahih li ghayri, but it's Sahih through corroborating evidence, not on its own. If you looked at one of those narrations, you have to say it's Hasan. But looking at the bigger picture, we say it's Sahih. Now, we also have the idea which a hadith which is acceptable through supporting narrations. Same thing with the job resume. Now, let's say someone applies for a job with a criminal history. So now all of a sudden, them on themselves, they're not that reliable. On their own, you can't trust them. But now you get multiple letters of recommendation for this person. That, oh, he's a reliable person. You can trust his academics. You can trust his work ethic. He reformed in prison. Now all of a sudden you begin to trust that person. It's not the same as something where it's like, oh, I totally trust him, but it is, you're starting to trust him more. And this is the idea of a weak hadith, which is not reliable on its own, but through supporting evidence now becomes more reliable and becomes something you can depend upon. This is the idea and the concept known as Hasan li ghayrihi. Weak hadith, multiple weak hadith that say the same point and prove the same point. We take all of those weak hadith, put it together, and we get a hadith which is Hasan, but not on its own, Hasan li ghayrihi. So it's when questioning character of a narrator. What exactly are you referring to? When you're saying it's questioning character of a narrator? That idea of like a job resume being a person with criminal history. This is the idea of a Daeef hadith. It's a hadith when itself has a deficiency in the character of its narrators or the precision of the narrators in itself. But if you have multiple people, they all have weak memory, but they're all saying the same thing, and all of a sudden you have to raise a question to that. Now that becomes acceptable, becomes Hasan. So why is a hadith daif? Because either in their character or in the memory. And so if they have they all have weak memory, but they have acceptable character, and they're all saying the same thing, that will now raise us from what is a weak daif hadith to something which is hasan. Now the question, it's an important question. Do all weak narrations support each other? Meaning, any level, we mentioned that weak hadith are different levels. Do any weak hadith, we take it, and then if we have a bunch of weak hadith saying the same thing, we'll move it. Not necessarily. Could you explain yourself, Sadia? Why do you think not necessarily? What do you think, Daniel? Like any level of weakness hadith. So first, one weak narration could contradict another. That's true. And we also have to look, what are the levels of weak hadith? Some weak hadith are weak hadith because they have liars in their chains of narration. If multiple liars are telling you the same thing, are you going to trust them? Daniel? Why not? Because they're weak and they're liars. We can't trust a liar. Even if there's multiple liars saying the same thing, we wouldn't trust that because they're known for lying. You can't authenticate them because this person, I don't know if he's telling a lie right now or telling the truth. He's lies sometimes, he tells the truth other times. We don't know. It's just a lie or truth. So not all weak narrations support each other. There are specific things we'll look at, like people with weak memory, but honest character, we'll trust them. If multiple people with weak memory are saying the same thing, but people who are multiple liars saying the same thing is not the same. So if 5 different narrations are all coming from liars, would that make the hadith rise to the level of Hasan li Hasan through corroborating evidence? The answer is no. Lying is a severe form of weakness. Once a narrator is known to be a liar, all of their narrations are rejected completely. There's no way to authenticate if they're lying here or telling the truth. So their narrations can't even be considered at all. How do we interact with weak hadith? I think we'll leave the class off with this, inshallah. And tomorrow we'll talk about the concept of weak hadith. How do we interact with weak hadith? Like people will say, oh, the hadith is weak, so we can't act upon it. Okay, is that true? How do we actually do mu'amala? How do we treat weak hadith? Others will use weak hadith and they'll prove anything. They'll try to prove anything they try to make. Like, for example, the hadith we took about Surah Yasin today, where we recite Surah Yasin as if the reward of 100,000 martyrs. Can we act upon that? It's a weak hadith. How do we interact with weak hadith? So there's a discussion, inshallah, we'll be getting into tomorrow. And I think tomorrow we'll do a bunch of review of that which we've gone over. And the rest of the class will be going into the details of what is a weak hadith, and the definitions and the antiquities, or not antiquities, the delicacies of weak hadith. Most of the discussion when it comes to hadith science is in how do we know hadith is weak or not. So it's important to understand. If there's any questions, inshallah, feel free to ask. If not, that will be the end of this class. Jazakumullah khair for attending. سبحانك وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. جزاك الله خير. آمين وإياك. الله يسلمك. Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam. So, okay, I'm recording.